very pleased to be interviewing Glenn Enoch, who's Vice President, Integrated Media Research at ESPN's Research and Analytics Department. Thank you for your time today.
Sure.
So let's start with your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, it's a longer story than I care to remember. I had an internship at ABC many decades ago that exposed me to research, and so after college, when I moved to New York, that's what I decided to do. So I spent about half of the intervening 30-plus years working on local station research, and then Artie hired me at ESPN, and I've been here for the last 13 years.
What did you study in school?
I was a communications major. I don't have any special math preparation or statistical background or anything like that. I pretty much studied radio, TV, film. And as I mentioned earlier, the internship that I had was really the critical factor in getting me exposed to media research and then, following up on that.
So what actually attracted you to research without any math or statistical background? What was it about research that drew you to it?
I think it's not a very good reason in retrospect, but I had this great internship at ABC where it was for 8 weeks in the summer of 1978, and every week I got moved to a different department. So one week I was with network news, and another week I was with WABC programming and so forth. And the week that I spent with Channel 7's research department was the only week where I actually got to do anything, because everything else was largely union controlled, and I wasn't allowed to touch anything or even really to perform any functions. So they let me pull overnights, an utterly prosaic task, but that's where a lot of people have started, pulling overnights, and so that it was the idea that I could actually get my hands on it, I think, that appealed to me first.
Glenn, what advice would you give for a college student today or somebody just graduating?
Who wants to get into
research, or who may not know about research and might be interested?
Most of them.
That would be a lot.
That would be most of them. Let me start by saying that I do as much speaking at colleges and universities as I can get into a given year. So I had a standing thing that I did at Syracuse for many years that I've now actually, two of our staffers, Dave Coletti and Stephanie DeVito, who are Syracuse grads, are doing this. I've spoken at Clemson in the past year. So I've done a lot of work. I have something at the University of Alabama that's coming up this year. So I do as much of this as I possibly can. Part of the reason is, I think, that students are not familiar with media research, and why would they be? There are very, very few colleges and universities that offer a course in the subject or even a glancing look at it. It is very difficult to get the material that you would need to even teach such a course. Professors often don't know how this stuff is used. So if you can go there and say, okay, we're a research company that's working on all 5 platforms, and we are doing all this research on audiences and advertisers and insights of various kinds. And here's what we're seeing. At least they have some idea that this is out there, and this is the kind of work that gets done. And it isn't. We try and not to make this dull to them. Artie Bulgren is a big believer that the data are really just the start of the journey. The communication of the data is really the key. I find that media researchers have 2 common faults. They want to tell you everything they know, and then they want to tell you how they found out. It's often difficult when you see presentations to get to the bottom line of what's going on. And we really work hard at making this stuff interesting and making it live for people who we're presenting to. So let's say we did that, and the college student is interested and comes up and says, so now this is great, how can I do this? I would say that the most important thing you could do probably is to get an internship, because you need to get exposed to what's really going on. There's no textbook that you're going to pick up. There's no magazine that you're going to pick up that's going to tell you how to do this. You need to find somebody that is doing it on a very high level and see what's going on. And the other advantage is that by having an internship, you get exposed to people that may help you ultimately to get a job. I will say that if you show up for an interview for a research analyst position and say, I'm really interested in media research, that you are way ahead of the game right away. I think just expressing an interest is something that goes a long way. And the thing that on one of my trips to Syracuse that I talked about, besides the internship thing, was the informational interview. It's difficult to find these openings. They don't happen all the time. Timing has a lot to do with it. But you can always go to people and say, listen, I'm interested in media research. I know you don't have an opening. Can I come and talk to you about how you got your start? And from that's how I found my job. I started by interviewing everybody that had research in their title and gradually found out where the openings were, and then began narrowing down to actual openings, and finally found somebody who was willing to give me a shot.
That's great advice. So you send your team out to colleges.
As much as I can. I encourage certainly my direct reports to do as much speaking at colleges as they can. And there's two reasons for this. One is that any speaking opportunity is good practice. So the way you become a better speaker is by speaking. And so if you can kind of book yourself a couple of times a year, it gives you the opportunity to do that. But secondly, college students ask odd questions. They're sort of, they help you to think on your feet because they don't ask the thing that you expect to hear. If we're speaking to an internal group, they have the benefit of having read our stuff, and we sort of understand their business model, and we understand the frame within which these questions are taking place. But students ask questions that are completely out of left field, and it helps you really understand what you know and how to put the pieces together in a way that they can understand. And I've actually had a situation in this very room that we're sitting in where we were speaking to a group of interns, and the subject of women's sports came up, and part of the room became persuaded that we were somehow holding back women's sports. I mean, who's done more for women's sports than ESPN has? And I actually had to go get somebody from the staff to come in and help me out with this group. So you never know what you're going to hear, and it really is great practice talking to students, I find.
It's almost like a focus group.
There you go.